So I'll just give you a bit of a brief about what we're going to cover today. I'll introduce our panelists, and then with the time that we have left, we'll aim to finish by just before 5 o'clock today. We'll go through a few different questions that I've prepared for them and see what they want to share with us. So Innovation for Climate Action, I think it's a very trendy, very cutting-edge title for this session. We heard today in the opening ceremony about the importance of the private sector. We heard about the importance of innovation in climate change. So what we have here are representatives from the startup community, from international agencies, from governments, from research and other departments. And what we're going to do is explore all the different dimensions that can contribute to tackling climate change and climate action using innovation, using entrepreneurship, creating basic ecosystem, using investments in that stage. The former Secretary of State, John Kerry, said in his opening statement this morning, I took the numbers down, he said, in the private sector, venture capital investment last year, or like from the United States, has amounted to $700 billion. The numbers that I looked up for the world in climate change technology, at least for 2021, that number last year was $41 billion, which is a huge number, but nothing compared to the 700 billion. And I think since we're in an ICF forum for Africa and African ministers, it's interesting to note of the 41 billion that was spent in venture capital last year, 95% of it went to either the US, Europe, or China. And for African startups and African companies that are looking to work on climate change, they got less than 0.1% of that number. So it is something to bear in mind and consider when we talk about Africa and the role that it's going to play between now and 2050. If we're expecting most of the population growth, most of the innovation, most of the startups to come from that part of the world, what are the incentives that we're putting in place for startups and for the innovation ecosystem? We don't know at this stage the importance of tech. Tech and innovation is the cutting edge of solving most of our problems today, but it's just a means to an end. Doesn't make it the end in itself. And for me, it's just about using those different resources that we are investing in different startups to try to fulfill that end. So we know that using technology, using innovation, using research, we can try to have more of an exponential impact with less resources, more effectively and more sustainably. What I'm going to start doing now is introducing our panelists, and then we'll start with some of the questions. So we don't have the people online, so I'm just going to move straight to there. We have with us Ines. Ines, welcome, who is the Managing Director of Impact and Partnerships at EBRD. Welcome, Ines. We have Kathleen. Kathy, welcome, who is an environmental engineer and the USAID Egypt Climate Lead. And before that, Kathy used to work in international development in Cameroon, Madagascar, and Tunisia. We have Kelvin. Hello, Kelvin. Kelvin is the representative of Climate Innovation for Adaptation and Resilience Alliance, and he's the Director of Risk and Reliance at FSD Africa. And we have here as well Mr. Mustafa Ashraf, who is the founder and CEO of Taqatak Renewable Energy Solution, where you do solar panels. I don't see our online panelists, but we have two of them with us. Hopefully we can see them soon. We have Dr. Deger Saigen, if you can hear us. It's great. Dr. Deger works at the OECD in the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Department, and where he leads the industry decarbonization program at the Environment Directorate. And finally, we have Dr. Daniel Anaros, who is the CEO of Manobi in Africa. Okay. So pending what we have online, and I really want to engage our guests who are online, I'll start with the questions here. We'll start with Mustafa, if you have a microphone. So Mustafa, welcome. Since you're a startup CEO and a founder, can you tell us a bit more about your journey to launching Taqatak, and can you tell us a bit more about how Taqatak is solving and working on climate action?
Okay, so we started back in 2018 when we had a dream when we were walking on the beach one day, enjoying the sun and everything was perfect until our batteries went dead. So back then we started thinking, why can't we have charging ports on the beach or any place where we go? So from there, we came up with Taqatak. Taqatak basically works on providing portable, not portable, accessible charging units using 100% solar energy to charge people's phones anywhere and anytime, using 100% solar energy and zero emissions. But on the other hand, so we could close the circle and be circular economy, we put advertising panels on all our devices so we could generate revenue from our devices, and not just people could charge their smartphones for free, but also advertisers could engage their target audience and also have an interactive advertising platform. So that's
Can you tell us how you got to where you are today, like the support, the ecosystem, and the scale of your operation?
Okay, so the first support we got was from the Egyptian president. He awarded us one of the innovative startups in Egypt back in 2017. And after that, we kickstarted with Falak Startups. They're a well-known accelerator now. We were the first round with a pre-seed investment. So we could start with our first client, were one of the banking sector, then governmental sector, then even food and beverages sector. So from there, we kick-started in 2017 by the honor of the president, and then the pre-seed fund. And currently, we're hoping to work on the COP and be a part of it.
Great. Are you all across Egypt only, or abroad?
Yeah, for now, across Egypt.
Great. Thank you, Mustafa. Ines, I'll ask you the next question. As kind of like a managing director at the EBRD, what are some of the things that you're looking for? What are investors looking for to double down on investments in this sector?
Thank you. And pleasure being here, talking about this very important topic, ahead of COP27. So EBRD is an investor. We do about 10 billion of investments per year, and we've made a commitment that at least half of that has to be green. So we are looking, from infrastructure projects, but also to small businesses. We are looking for companies that can support the green and the climate agenda. So this is, really a critical part of our mandate. For startups and entrepreneurs, we are focusing, we have a specific program called StarVenture that provides advisory services and mentoring to entrepreneurs and startups. Because we feel, not just having that idea, but also then the ability to turn that idea into a business, presenting a business plan, going into and talking to the VCs, and having that mindset of making it operational is very important. So we look into also to companies that have that, openness of mind and saying, what is it that I need to do for the next step? We engage with a network of mentors, a lot of them, from Silicon Valley to, a lot of them also in London, where we are based, that help entrepreneurs, going then to the next stage beyond, that light bulb moment that you had on the beach. So we look into that. We look into, how is it that you can turn your business into a commercially sustainable proposition. And we also look into mobilizing donor funds to help kickstart that, because we also realize that, and if you wanted to discuss a little bit more on how to finance this, a lot of it is needed out of just equity. You need equity and not, a loan-based products to promote entrepreneurship. So we also look into ways of supporting that with some donor assistance as well.
Yeah, and maybe you can just, to kind of like double down on that, I still have a follow-up question, which is, for climate action itself, what is your stance and what are you seeing happen? What are some of the trends or that investors are looking at, just to kind of like keep that thread going?
Yeah. So specifically for startups on green, we have just launched, we have a generic program called the StarVenture, but we recently launched the Green StarVenture. So the Green StarVenture is looking into solutions that help, the climate issues. I was just participating on a session recently, for example, where there was a startup that provided three-wheeled solar-based powered cars to help the gig economy. So they have identified a problem, for example, on supply chain, saying, now it's very difficult to get cars because there are supply chain issues. We're developing this specific product that is very much needed by the gig economy, but also helps on the climate. So we're seeing actually a lot of creativity and opportunity as well from this, climate-driven problems with entrepreneurs coming up with ideas. So there is definitely a trend. There's also a lot of interest from investors, with ESG, becoming quite a bit of a focus of, a lot of the entrepreneurs, and climate being in the mind of everyone. There are VCs that are looking specifically as well for green solutions, right? So we do see that trend growing, and that's why, specifically we've just launched this green startup program.
Great, thank you very much. I see we have Degger online. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. I can't hear you. Do we have the audio for the people on Zoom sorted? Okay, I wanted to direct the second question to you, Degger, but I think we can't hear you, so I'll come back to you. Sorry for that. Kathy, I'm going to ask you the next question. So you've been in the field, you've worked across Egypt, across Africa. What are some of the barriers and gaps that you're seeing that need to be addressed?
Yeah, that's tough. I think we have a lot of incredible innovators on the stage, online. So I want to speak a little bit to what can impinge on some of the barriers and gaps on our ability to innovate. And I think that there's a lot, but some of those might be, how are we educating and have the capacity to educate future climate leaders and future climate tech leaders? As an engineer, I'm incredibly passionate about tech, but also that intersection of policy. So how are we building a resilient, enabling environment and an ecosystem that has the capacity to scale innovations? And then also critically, as everyone in this room knows, financing. And not just the amount of finance, but how we finance. Often we have incredibly siloed funds when we're trying to solve a cross-cutting and a wicked problem. We often have a lot of funds for startups, but how do you transition that gap to being a medium-sized enterprise? So I think there's a lot of challenges there. One of the big things that USAID Egypt works on that first piece, on that training and capacity development, is what does that education look like and how can it be practical and applied? So we've worked with the Egyptian government to develop 10 international applied technology schools, for example, that include environmental education in their curricula, but they also partner secondary students with job opportunities and partner with climate-related businesses to incorporate technical expertise. And this builds off of a previous pilot we did where we were looking at where do we see a burgeoning renewable energy environment and how can we work with the private sector and the Egyptian government to develop the new and renewable energy diploma program. So this was looking at specialties on solar and wind, an area where the private sector was saying, hey, we're trying to innovate here, but we also need the economy and the local ecosystem to be able to provide skilled tech workers to support on this. And I think this week we had a fun case study where we had a youth climate change model conference, which was looking at raising awareness about international frameworks in the run-up to COP27 on climate. And we had an entrepreneurial competition locally. And earlier this week, Abdul Rahman Ashraf was selected as the innovation winner for a proposal about capsules with absorption capacity to be based in heavy floodplain areas here that we only anticipate to continue to deal with floods. This could work then to capture that water and return it to governments. This could be leveraged by large agricultural private sector entities that are worried about crop cycles and flooding. So I think his proposal was exciting, and he'll now be attending COP27 to develop additional resources on that proposal. I think on the financing side, we know that this requires financial innovation too. And public sources of capital are limited. This is going to require broad private sector involvement to meet climate goals and looking through that blended finance approach. The IPCC estimates that we need $1.6 trillion to keep to that 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius range, and only 38% of that was funded in 2019. So I think there's a number of barriers there. We've committed to doubling our public sector financing in this area by 2024. And also in our agency personally has a new target by 2030 of leveraging $150 billion of public and private finance for climate. And then finally, I think the enabling environment piece is the stickiest and the hardest of those pieces. I think training and financing are critical, but without resilient institutions, we're not going to see that same innovation sector. So where does innovation go? How does it scale? We've seen, like renewable energy, for example, a number of projects have costs that have dropped 90% in the past decade. We've seen that on EV batteries. We've seen that on energy efficient hardware. So how to bring that to bear, I think, is a challenge. And I think that's where climate governance comes in. And so that's one of the big areas we work on with a number of ministries here as well. But the last plug I'll say, especially for folks in this room, when we're working through that enabling environment, we have a current program that deals with renewable energy value chains and renewable energy accelerators, but we've recently launched with the Egyptian government and the private sector the Climatech Run global competition to identify green innovators and technologies from entrepreneurs around the world. So it is a global competition. Winners of the competition will receive a cash prize. They'll have an invitation to present their innovative climate change solution at COP27. They're seeking startups and entrepreneurs from all over the world, but especially encourage entrepreneurs and innovators from Africa and MENA to apply. And the deadline is September 22nd. So if you have an innovation, if you have a good idea, we'd love to hear it. And that's at climatechrun.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Kelvin, I'm going to turn to you now. Can you tell us a bit more about the role of research and national programs in tackling climate action, and how do they help?
Great, thanks Ode, and pleasure to be here. So I'm representing the Climate Innovation for Adaptation and Resilience Alliance, as Ode mentioned at the beginning, and that alliance is, the objective is really the same as this session, is how do we spur innovation for climate action, how do we develop tech solutions that scale climate resilience for vulnerable populations, and that work is happening around the globe, and the alliance is made up of private sector, financial institutions, and also development organizations like FSD Africa ourselves, and we're doing a broad range of work. I mean, I think we're at an African conference. I just want to give the African context. As Ode mentioned at the beginning, there's real challenges in terms of the investment side. There's very little money from investors flowing into climate tech, and so one of the challenges is that investors don't really understand the space. They don't understand the investment thesis, and they don't really get the business case yet. And so one of the kind of knowledge pieces and research that we're doing is publishing different investment theses in the climate space so that investors can understand the business case better. And so we have three particular theses. One is financial resilience, the other is climate smart livelihoods, and the third is sustainable utilities, and that will be published soon. And so things like that help to drive the ecosystem, I think, are important. But we also need early stage startups to flourish and to grow, and so there's a big role for incubators and accelerators. So part of the work of the Alliance is Catalyst Fund in Africa, which is doing both of those things as well as the ecosystem development. And so on the incubator side, we are doing some venture launching because we don't see enough pipeline of climate startups in Africa at the moment. And so that's a response to that. We have 31 fellows who have kind of left their jobs and are joining the program. We're busy matchmaking, forming teams. They're pitching kind of new ideas and about to receive kind of early stage grant funding to incubate their ideas. But we're also doing acceleration through Catalyst Fund. And so we've been scouring the continent, much like this climate competition, looking for the best climate tech startups across the continent. We've reviewed over 1,000 pitch decks, and we're narrowing it down to 10 that will make it into the final cohort. And some really exciting startups starting to come through into that cohort with really innovative ideas. And I think we need to see the examples of the solutions that they are bringing, and so we intend to publish that as well, along with the thesis to kind of further the business case, and happy to talk further about some of those startups and kind of the innovations that we're seeing.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question, which is, can you give us a few success stories or good examples of, not necessarily from this cohort or previous cohorts, stuff that you've come across that we can learn more about?
Great, so there's a lot, but maybe in this sort of time, I'll just pick two. So one is Farms to You, which is a Nigerian startup. It's two local co-founders. It's a female CEO. And they have an ag tech platform which enables farmers to access personalized information on regenerative agricultural practices, to get access to finance, to get access to quality and traceable inputs, and then also to aggregate and get access to a market. And we're seeing some really good early traction from them. They're really growing fast in Nigeria. They're also having some good success in terms of proving agricultural yield improvement, and so that's an exciting startup in the ag space. In Egypt here specifically, we actually have quite a number of really exciting startups that are in the cohort. One is Baramoda, which takes agricultural waste and then uses technology to process that into organic fertilizer and soil, which then can be used to kind of reclaim desert land to save water and to improve yields, and also getting some really good traction. And so there we are. We also see in InsurTech space, in sustainable utilities, some really exciting kind of new innovations coming through.
Thank you very much. I can see we have our colleagues from online back. Is the sound working fine now? Thumbs up.
Do you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. Great. Fine. Great to have you guys. Hallelujah.
But if it's Daniel's turn, I can also leave it to him. But I was just thinking of saying a few things about the blended finance, if it's fine with you.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Just because we have very limited time, and this point on finances come, and I wanted to make a few points around it, because some of you may know, at the end of last month, we released the blended finance guidance for clean energy technologies, and that's probably very interesting for some of the industry actors and also the financial institutions in various African countries. We've heard these numbers quite a bit of time, but there is a significant scale up of clean energy investments needed by the end of 2030. More than 3 times, and majority of those investments need to happen in emerging and developing economies. And the financing challenge is equally important. As we know, public finance was important, and it has been, and it will be playing a role. But equally important will be how to mobilize the private capital actually, and use the limited, scarce public finance for the problems for which commercial solutions are less viable. And in that sense, blended finance and the strategic use of public finance by governments becomes an important issue, especially because many of the clean energy technologies we are talking about and needing for this net zero goals are already commercially available. So the two key things which are needed, as we've heard also before, the right policy environment and the use of just enough public finance for de-risking. So in that sense, blended finance, building on the expertise and the resources of both private and public sectors, needs to be scaled up significantly. But how to do that, that's the key question. And for that, we need to understand the risks related to projects, related to sectors and country, because the blended finance needs to be tailored for overcoming these specific risks as part of a wider suite of enabling measures. So it's a case-by-case analysis, its use. And also I want to highlight one thing, and I want to give just very brief few examples of how we can do this, but just before that, I want to highlight one important point about the blended finance. For innovative technologies, the technologies must not be presenting significant technology risk, and it should at least be proven in some markets. So that's a key issue around the strategic use of blended finance. Now, a few examples which I can give you, which are also relevant for the case of many Africa countries, is, for instance, how to use blended finance for off-grid renewable energy projects. One way could be the aggregate, so it's facilitating the aggregation of small projects into larger ones, investable ones. In a similar fashion, it can help also to unlock commercial finance for energy efficiency by supporting the aggregation of small loans into bigger ones. For utility scale renewables, it can also play a role across the many different stages of renewable energy deployment. Let's say for project preparation and development in the form of grants, and guarantees and risk insurance during construction, revenue guarantees during operation. So different types for different stages of renewables. But important for more innovative, more newer technologies like green hydrogen, very important for North Africa, many other Africa countries, CCUS, energy storage. There are many risks we need to understand about them related to revenue uncertainty, information asymmetries, supply chain risk, but most importantly, they come with higher capital costs. So that's key, and we know that. So the use of blended finance, therefore, needs to be considered carefully, especially because some of these projects may not always have a commercial sustainability. So in that sense, revenue guarantees, partial risk facilities, to make a viable project and help cost reductions will be important, and blended finance can be an important tool there. Just gave some highlights from that guideline report we released last month. You can find more there, and I'll just stop here because of the limited time. Thank you again. And if there are any questions, I'm of course happy to follow up on certain things. Thank you.
We'll definitely let you know. Thank you very much, Dager, for sharing all of these different schemes for tackling renewables. Can we have also Daniel on the screen, because I'd like to engage him. Daniel, welcome. Great to have you with us. Again, we've heard a lot from people about supporting the ecosystem about financing. We initially heard from Mustafa, who is a CEO and a founder of a startup. You are also the CEO and a founder of a business and an enterprise. Can you tell us a bit more about Manobi, what you do, and how you're trying to tackle climate action?
Thank you very much. Okay, we work in two main areas, main domains. We provide solutions to improve water service and water operations of utilities, and develop access to water in rural and urban areas. So we have a platform named Utility 85, which is used in several countries right now by different utilities. And also we provide solutions in the agricultural sector to, let's say, orchestrate, organize value chain and make them attractive, attractive to finance for small farmers, particularly to address some food sovereignty issues. One example we do in the agricultural sector, currently we are focused on the rice value chain. Currently I'm in Senegal, and which is one of the Western African countries in ECOWAS, and this region is importing almost, the import bill of this country is almost $3.2 billion in rice. And most of these countries have land and lands and workforce and water and resources to produce, but they continue to import. So what we, and particularly the reason of that is because smallholder farmers don't have access to credit. So, and rice is one of the most important CO2 gas emission across all the agricultural sector. So our strategy right now is to make these farmers attractive to invest locally in order to produce locally, and then also to bring them to adopt proper solutions to reduce the impact on environment, which means, for instance, to adopt some what they call sustainable rice intensification techniques, reduce water use, reduce input use, and brings that within a P&L which could be attractive and help to develop sustainable models, considering all the impact, environmental impact and ethical impact we can have on this particular segment. So currently we are covering 10 countries. We have almost 19 countries in which we are working on. And we try to continue pushing this, showing banks that it is more interesting to invest in smaller farmers and to finance their credit, rather to only focus on financing importers to import fruits in these countries. And that has a huge impact on carbon emission, and a huge impact on the climate, considering that only in Africa we have almost 20 million hectares of rice, which is crop, and that could be, for instance, bring into such a strategy. So that's what we are doing. Currently we are in the process to raise funds because we want to extend the system across Africa, starting from Western Africa, where we are already implementing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel, telling us about the extent and the impact of Monobi. We'll come back to that in a second in the AgTech space. I think as we're looking now back to different ecosystem, I'll start with Ines and then we'll hear from the rest of the panel. What are some of the best strategies and tools that you see could work to incubate and create a successful ecosystem for startups, and how can we get started on that when it comes to climate action?
Thank you. Just based on our experience and some of my colleague panelists have spoken to this about. So we see that it's extremely important to have incubators in the country. So we see this as not just because of the networking possibilities of people connecting, but also, introducing them to potential investors and VCs. So we see, the role of incubators as being extremely important. And here again, if such incubators can have the support from the government or from institutions, donors, multilaterals, I think that works really well, because you do need that sort of kickstart at the beginning. Networking works very well as well. So, connecting to like-minded entrepreneurs that have done this, in other countries. So, just that network effect is very well. And we also seen that, beyond investment, the technical assistant and advisory for us has been critical to promote startups and small businesses to flourish. So, and that advisory can be, from financial management to something a little bit more industry specific or expertise. But I would not, I would really underscore the importance of this non-financial side to it. So, a mix of, incubators, technical assistance, financial advisory, and support from governments. And the support from governments also comes from regulations and, ability to promote startups and new businesses by creating incentives, right? So this to us is seen also as a key for success.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about the role of government. Kathy, you talked about the climate tech run. Are there any other things that USAID has done just to incubate and support this ecosystem, and some of the lessons that you've learned or good strategies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think one of the other areas that we've been working a lot in, especially on our education portfolio, is looking at kind of applied research solutions. And I think a big part of government is often de-risking, I think, as a number of our panelists have mentioned. We have two big centers of excellence, one on energy and one on water, because we know the climate crisis is also a water crisis. And so I think in those two areas, both looking, and I think cross-cutting on either side, on both mitigation and adaptation and resilience on energy institutions, but also how we think through mitigation on water and wastewater side as well, looking through how can we inform policy formation, what are market-driven research ideas, and I just came last night back from Alexandria, where they had the first international annual water symposium, and it was a partnership in the Center of Excellence for Water, which is like a $30 million institution, but it's a partnership between the private sector, the government of Egypt, 6 Egyptian universities, 4 US universities, kind of all gathering this consortium of people thinking through how do we do that. And there were a number of fascinating presentations on climate and water tech and looking through that resilience. But I think there was a great point earlier about how to kind of scale out and look at that on a bigger picture scale, and how do we incentivize that ecosystem. And I think the other thing, much broader than USAID, but on the US government perspective as well, was we were really excited when President Biden on August 16th signed our Inflation Reduction Act, because I think in addition to it being the single largest investment we've made domestically on climate change, it also was very creative in how it looked at tech. So it really looked at how do we do tax credits and subsidies and different incentives on technology. And it was cross-cutting on everything from solar and wind and geothermal to carbon capture and hydropower and on and on and on. But I think it really looked at how do you unlock and grow green tech through additional bonus credits for solar on federally subsidized housing areas, but also on, especially investing in distributed zero-emission technologies like heat pumps, like community solar, and then also looking how do we distribute EV also in underserved communities domestically. So I think, on that policy formation side, how do we both support and de-risk growth in some of these areas, but also how do we incentivize it in others? And it's a tough needle to thread, but it's been exciting to see on some of the work done in these areas.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kathy. If we were to look at the other side, Mustafa, I'll look at you. What are some of the struggles that you're encountering in the startup world when it comes to this field, when it comes to climate action? Because we heard about the incentives in place and we heard about the structure from one side. You're on the other end. What are some of the challenges and struggles that you're facing?
Okay, so when we look to it from the side of the investors, when you go talk to investors, they're looking more for month-to-month burn rate, month-to-month revenues. To be honest, green startups have a hard time doing that in the right time being. But green startups could help really the vision of going to net zero in the awareness, our products, for example, advertising the green energy everywhere, people seeing solar panels on the beach, in any outdoor places they go, in universities, schools, parks, or everything. We could help the awareness. On the same time, we could generate revenue, but we need some education, I'm sorry to say that, for the investors to know how potential we have for our environment and how potential we have also for generating revenue. We're not the e-commerce platform or the fintech company that would burn rate and have a revenue based on every month, but we are a bit like the innovative part of the renewable energy sector or the green tech sector. We will generate money, but we need time, we need effort, not only from the investor to put money. No, we need guidance like from the EBRD, and we were very happy to know that the Green Start Venture program is launched, that we need help from not only money, but we need it technically, marketing-wise, sales-wise. So because an investor is not only about money, it's about connections. They could help us connect to a lot of sectors that green startups target, like large developers, agriculture sector for the green tech startups related to the agriculture sector. So this is the struggles we have. Yes, we need help, and yes, we need it as soon as possible, because as I told you, we started from 2018, and if we kept going on the way that we're just doing the sales ourselves and everything step by step, no, we need to skyrocket like every other startup that did and had huge finances, like big numbers, more than 100 million stuff. Yes, we could be as big as these other startups, but we need investors that really believe in our technology and really believe that we could change the world and we could help in climate change.
Thanks. I think sustainable and holistic support, which is great for the climate as well. Daniel, I'd like to hear your perspective as well, since you do it at a much bigger scale across Africa. And I can repeat the question if you want me to. Daniel, stage? Yes.
Yeah, so for us, the point is really to pass over an inflection point where, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a pass over an inflection point where we can engage more farmers into our system. And that depends to two main factors for us. The first one is bring to a richer scale where the banks can see clearly the advantage to invest in local production, the value which can bring in terms of climate impact, in terms of value creation into rural areas, and how we can de-risk that example where banks can finally decide to finance smallholder farmers rather than to finance importers. That's something that is important, and we spend time to showcase these banks that for a portion of what they finance today into imports, we can produce locally what is required to ensure the food sovereignty of this country, and we can create jobs. So we need to scale up the system, which requires that we have our farmers, we have more financing line to finance our farmers, so credit to the farmers. So for that, for sure, we need to talk with impact investors. We need to bring Dagger spoke about blending finance. So we have to find solution to finance this credit that these farmers are missing today in order to produce efficiently. And on the other side, on our side, on our specific side, for sure, we need working capital because as much as the system will continue to grow, we need to reinforce our team, we need to develop our marketing tool, we need to increase our platform size, we need to reach also the point where we will be profitable and we can generate enough revenue and enough margin in order to finance our own development, which is not so far. But for that, we are looking for investors and we are looking for funding in order to pass over these two inflection points that we want to see them coming semesterly.
Thank you. Yes, journey of a founder or CEO is never easy, but as we recognize the key role that the private sector is going to play in this, I think it's a long road ahead, but I think there's enough resources and support and appetite to kind of join forces. As we're getting ready to wrap up, I want to give all the panelists a chance to just do a closing statement. So we'll give each one of you kind of the microphone to share with us just a closing statement on your opinion for innovation and climate action. What can be done? What are the opportunities? What are the gaps that still need to be addressed that you'd like the audience to know? I'll start with Kelvin.
Great. So I think we were really excited about this space. I think we see climate tech in Africa being at the stage that fintech was like 10 years ago, and really at a nascent stage, but potential to grow really fast. And really excited about it because we need to move a lot faster in the climate space, and digital technology gives us the ability to do that. I think it also gives us the ability to leverage local solutions. And so you find that founders come from local communities, understand the problems on the ground, and are solving for those communities. And so, we're getting representatives also from youth, from women, and so it's an inclusive way to solve the climate problem. And just one point on opportunities. We already see that the carbon markets present a really fundamental opportunity for shaping the way that we respond to climate change in Africa. And I think that they present an opportunity to layer on top additional revenues that make the business case more attractive for investors. And so we're doing a lot of work looking at the case for carbon markets and for startups to really access that and to democratize access to carbon markets. So I think that's a space to watch.
Thank you. Dagger, can we hear from you online?
Of course. I think most have been said, but just to try to add a few things. One point which is relevant for all actors would be to have well-defined national strategies for decarbonization. So to create a predictable environment where investors, startups, and any other actor can see which direction they will be going. I mentioned financing part before, but I want to say the enabling conditions, the regulatory framework are also equally important because they are part of the, let's say, the support. And especially when it comes to technologies which have higher costs, de-risking is key. And also ways to bridge the viability gap are key. And financing will be important, but many things can be done before coming to financing with a strong regulatory environment, framework, and also with the enabling environment. So these are also equally important components. And one last thing, and this applies to, I think, both the public and private sectors, cooperation, a strong network of partners, because it is challenging sometimes for single actors to take over all the risks. So that is essential. Country partnerships, as we see, like in green hydrogen projects, are key. Technical assistance, sharing best practices, and also, as I mentioned, the international and national financing actors to also cooperate, engage with each other along with these national strategies will be important. So thank you again. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you very much. It was indeed. Ines, do you want to do yours?
Thank you. I just to mention, I think a big opportunity now with a lot of focus with COP27 being held in Egypt, and I think this is great momentum around it. I think you have governments, multilateral institutions, donors, very strong statements that were made also today by John Kerry and others, in terms of support and commitment, and trying to find solutions that are actually within all of us, right? So from governments, but also to the small entrepreneurs. So I think we do have an opportunity here, particularly in Egypt, where in the energy sector, there is solar, there is wind, there is high potential for renewables, from large-scale solutions to small-scale solutions, like your own startup. And I hope that EBRD will play a very active role in that. So we're very excited.
We hope so too. Mustafa, do you want to give yours?
I really hope that the COP27 becomes the start for no going back to anything but green. I hope that we always go from here, starting from COP27 to the green tech and everything that relates to reducing our emissions and really taking it serious even after the COP. So I hope that, and I really believe that startups, not only nationally but internationally, in the green in the green tech sector, could really change the game. It could be a really game changer. Thank you.
Thanks. 60 days to COP. We'll find out soon. Kathy.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. I think everyone's interested to see where this lands. I think we're certainly still interested in working on innovations across mitigation, adaptation, and financial innovations, as I think all of our speakers have really spoken about today. I think initiatives like our Climate Tech Run in the run-up to COP27 are critical, but you're absolutely right. It's looking at what's next and what's beyond, and that should be a launching pad for ideas, but not where it ends, and how can we continue to support startups and have a robust ecosystem that's waiting there for when you launch your innovation. And I think everyone in this room feels the same way because you opted to come to a meeting about climate tech. But I will say that this is pressing. It's imperative. It's now. We are seeing these impacts now. We are seeing the effects of increased wildfires. We are seeing, and concerned about what prolonged drought looks like in the Horn of Africa. We are seeing increased and additional severity of hurricanes in my home state of Florida. And so I think that, we need those green innovations. We need those breakthrough technologies that needs to be front and center in the global climate change agenda. And again, also providing novel opportunities for startups and businesses to have the space to grow and thrive as they develop these innovations. And so I think we'll all continue to work together in the run-up to COP, but particularly beyond.
It's a huge potential indeed. Daniel, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, everything has been already said, but for me, I think it's time to see some champions emerging, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, in this particular topic of companies really addressing the climate change at scale. And that requires much more financing, which is already available today, in order to do that. We face a situation where the momentum of financing mobilization has to be a little bit in phase in order to really support the innovation, the momentum of innovation which is brought on the table by many companies. So my dream is that, let's say, by the next 10 years, Africa being food sovereign, and that every single people in Africa have access to water in decent condition at the best price possible, and without the vast amount of non-revenue water wasted today. So, and I think we can achieve that. We have the startups, we have the ecosystem already prepared, And we just need to align these different elements of the toolbox, which are the financing, the startups, and policy, in order to achieve. I don't think that we have any big issues to find good ideas, to find good business. In our case, for instance, we have developed a business model. We proved the system. We are not a startup anymore, but it's not an easy thing in order to scale up as we would like to do it. And I think it's time to really accelerate this momentum, and we can do it. We can achieve all these objectives that we are targeting for the next 10 years.
Yes, and I think from pledges to implementation rings true here. We'd all, on behalf of everyone in the room, want to be part of that dream. So we've reached the end of our session. I would like to thank all of our panelists for being with us today in person and remotely. Thank you for all your contributions and statements. Thank you for all of you for attending the session and hearing what they all had to say. It's been a pleasure moderating this, and I hope you enjoy the next couple of days of the ICF. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you very much.